February 2nd meeting of the Conover Planning Board. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. We have a chance to review the minutes, any changes or corrections or comments. Have a motion to approve.
Move to approve the minutes of prior meeting.
Neil, do I have a second?
Second.
Cameron? Say aye.
Aye.
All those like.
Aye.
Aye, minutes are approved. No, okay, second item, comments from Mayor Lee Moritz Jr.
Let's see if Lee is here.
Okay.
Right, excuse me.
I don't believe he's coming tonight,
Really?
yeah, unless he changed his plans.
Oh.
But if you talked to him later than I did,
I didn't, I talked to him last week and he was coming, I thought.
this morning he mentioned that he probably would not be.
Oh, okay.
But something
We'll
changed.
we'll postpone
Okay.
comments from the mayor.
We have no lease, so we will go on to old business, so we'll go on to new business. Rezoning R2101 Mile Creek Reserve property. Brian, speak to you.
Yes, sir. So this is the property at the back of the Smith tract. It's that 14.5 acre site that has been part of this larger piece, and we've been working on it for the last few months. This is the M1 conditional district for that potential building, proposed structure. That was approved by city council. The area in front, which is about 5.5 acres or so, was also approved for M1 at the January meeting of council. And this is also reflecting the changes to the Bell Fox track and Conley Fox track. Those were also approved for M1. Wild Creek Preserve, which is Mr. Wells, he's requesting that this last part, the 14 acres, for your consideration to be rezoned to M1 as well, which is general manufacturing. Now, I'll tell you that most of the land in this 14 acre tract is in the floodplain, meaning that it's going to have restrictions over all that property. Regardless of the zoning, this is that piece again right here, kind of bottomland, farmland, and it's got the creek going right through the back here. And I'm going to show you the floodplain area. This is that same two pieces, and we're looking at this part here. This heavy blue line is the floodplain line. And then this is actually the floodway. The floodway is that portion of a flood area that you really can't disturb at all. You can't really do anything in it. With some work, it would take a little work, but with some work, you can affect the floodplain because it's not part of this floodway area. They're both regulated. But with some work, you could adjust maps and flood maps and raise the land and get things out of the zone of the 100-year flood. This portion here, which is 2.5, 3 acres, is actually dry land. Doesn't go under the flood. And so when the staff are reviewing this and considering the request for everything to be M1, just to be consistent, I understand that. We wondered if this could be used open space, OS. But the request came in with M1, and with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wells if you want to make any comments, sir. That's the request in front of you. It's an M1 change for this track in the back. Currently, it's that R20, which is residential count. So we've got to assign zoning to it, and so the process, of course, comes to the planning board for recommendation and then moves on to city council. So that's the part we're in right now.
Good evening. Thank you. This is a simple map cleanup. It's a 14.5 acre tract that is part of and inside of the new and expanded Lime Creek Technology Park, which is 220 acres. It's already been rezoned in this whole vicinity, which is zoomed out from here to include what was known as the North Carolina Data Campus. This 15-acre remainder has M1 around 3 sides, as you can see, and that is 84% of its boundaries. Cleaning this up makes sense. Planning staff is not opposed to it. And I ask that you approve rezoning for M1 because it does allow expansion of the manufacturing from Log Creek Technology Park. And this whole area is so close to I-40, it has as little impact on communities as any site could have in this town. And that's what we're trying to accomplish, get the traffic to the interstate, not to a neighborhood. I'm here for questions. if you
Just to open up, what Cal mentioned about their suggestion regarding the open space as part of that, does that cause an issue for what you're trying to do with the property?
Thank you for that question. I have spent considerable time over the last few years on land preservation and open space and state parks and funding. It is my belief that there is probably 70 acres, not 10, that needs to be protected in this area. But we got to figure out how to do it. And the problem with that floodplain map, if we could go back to that, if you would. A GIS map is not a survey. Nobody's been out there on the ground. If you go on the GIS, you will see blue line streams that are not actually blue line streams in my view. And nobody has gone out there with a survey and put a floodplain map and done the kind of engineering work that you have to do. I've got folks to do that, but until we get through this process, we can't do it. We've got to get everything else to the road, and they're so busy, like everybody else that works these days, getting something out of them is a real challenge. But what I would anticipate is that we come up with a way to see, and as Alan mentioned, you can move around floodplain lines. You can't cause a rise and flood, but you can move around the lines. So there may be a way to take that snaky looking line and make it more of a squared off line if that proposed building needed an additional pad behind it. We're getting into a lot of details, and I don't need to do that, but I'm saying there's a large number of considerations that can be dealt with later. As I said, our group's probably identified over 700 acres and got them under control of Foothills Conservancy and others in Conover County in the last 2 years. We have been integral in the planning of the main line of the Carolina Thread Trail. I know those folks very well and talk to them on a regular basis. And we talk to them about the site. We have extensive relationships with mitigation people that do stream improvement. And we spent hours with them, including about 3 hours last week on the site. There's a lot of things that need to be done. It's my intention to help do those. But I like to do it as a holistic approach, tying into the other things that are out in the neighborhood and in this community, and make this thing work well for the entire county. That's where I'm going.
David, I did see a question from Mary.
Yeah.
And she asked if, with the intent to link this piece here with really the rest of the developable site, and I think with it being match and zoning, you feel like there could be some things that could work together here. This is under a conditional zoning, right, with a 150,000 square foot potential structure. If it needed to expand there, we would have to amend that plan, but it's possible there would be a process to do that, should the land be needed. Yeah, but so Mary, yes, this could work together, or it could be a separate component, but would still link in most likely with the front up here, where we had a driveway and stuff we were looking at before.
If I may. We would hate to lose a user for 175,000 foot building because we couldn't expand back. And we wouldn't want that to be a reason to lose a user, industrial user in this area. So we're trying to maintain that flexibility. Again, I'll do everything I can. I can't do it alone, but I will do everything I can to protect the land. This isn't the prettiest part. To protect the land that needs to be protected as affordably as possible for our local taxpayers.
I guess, we need to open a public hearing, and then there's no, okay. We open the public hearing. Do we have anybody online, do you know, remotely, for questions, comments on the public hearing?
No.
No. And I'll close the public hearing. Okay. Any comments by the board? I mean, obviously, the things, you know, we're gonna have to take a little different direction than what we first looked at, you know, back in November. But given what council has done, I mean, to me, the zoning request makes sense given the direction that they've taken. So,
I'm not supposed to approve.
okay, we have a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman, do you have a second?
I move to approve the rezoning request R2101 as shown on Exhibit A map from Talbot County Single Family Residential R20 to City of Conover, Virginia Manufacturing M1 and the adjustments to the land development plan to show the manufacturing use because there's a need for growth in the manufacturing sector. I also find that the request is reasonable in the public interest because number one, rezoning would allow the expansion of manufacturing facilities and ancillary site improvements. Number two, the area is close to the interstate, which is poised for growth.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
I will, move on to city council, in the next month for March.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown. He seconded the motion.
Mr. Williams.
Good evening, everyone.
Mr. Williams, yeah.
I ain't here.
Okay, item two, zoning code amendment, small changes, 2021.
All right, thank you. So once or twice a year, typically, we work on, small changes to our zoning ordinance as things are brought to our attention or requests are made. So part of this wording amendment, text amendment that you are considering, came out of the conversation we had last time we met in December with the Smithfield folks who were concerned about buffers. And what's in our ordinance today for buffers is a little bit small, and this is a way to try to address that. But the first two items on this amendment were things that we brought a few months ago for your consideration, and City Council sent them back with a recommended change. So the first one is this Article 2, Division 2, is that fencing. When council was made aware that we allow fences in the front yard, they were surprised by that and thought we shouldn't have fences in the front yard. And so they made a recommendation, and when you make a recommendation to change an ordinance, it's got to start at the planning board, and then it'll make its way back to council. So that's what that first one is, that in residentially zoned areas, there would be no front yard fences. Okay, on the side and rear, and we have a pretty generous ordinance for side and rear, but they're recommending that no fences be provided in the front.
This is just in residential, correct?
Just in residential, yeah. We have a little note there to make that clear, and that was the intent.
On the current side, somebody, I assume it's allowed, obviously, so if it was, what are the restrictions on that?
Today in the ordinance, it says it's up to 3 feet. Limited to 3 feet.
Does it say that's the type of fencing?
Yeah, it can be a wood fence, chain link, kind of like the metal pickets, that kind of thing. Not hard, not like solid metal, like corrugated metal fence, that kind of stuff. Could do that. You do wood fence, picket fence. But this is, they're recommending that no fences be permitted. And then on the side, the same kind of rules apply to the types of fencing that are permitted. So,
Is that just for aesthetic reasons?
I believe it's just for aesthetics. They felt that Conover, for the most part, Conover is really open. The front yards are open. And so it's a little more welcoming. They felt like it just reflected better on the community. Now, folks who have a fence, because there are some, they could keep and maintain those, but we wouldn't permit new ones.
Just, I guess, a matter of, how often do we see the request for front yard fence? Well, the reason I say that, if it's few and far between, I mean, I've taken selfishly of myself, you know, I've got dogs that I love, and I love just being able to let them out and run around.
Yeah.
You know, and every house is different in terms of where it sits on property and where, you know, yardage might be available, sometimes more in the back, sometimes maybe more in the front,
Yes.
you know, and, you know, like in my neighborhood, I mean, I really wouldn't care if somebody put a fence in their front yard, as long as it was not an ugly.
There's some I would prefer that there's.
Yeah. You know, I mean, if there's something that was really pervasive and going on all the time, I'd say, okay, yeah, maybe there's something to be.
As we talked about this, you know, I certainly don't know every neighborhood, and in some neighborhoods, it's been a few years since I've been through, but I could not off the top of my head think of a single home that has a fence in the front yard.
There's one right down 16, right at the where Fifth comes out on the left. If you're going towards Walmart, there's one right on the road that's got a white picket style vinyl fence.
Okay. Yeah, and then 2 tracks as they were in the chain link.
And the only place that I see to me that this would be an issue is places like a rock barn, or where you have more plantation style homes that you would typically see somebody have a gated front yard. You know, where you would have a brick columns with the you know, the wrought iron fencing. You know, you see that a lot in like a Nashville or somewhere like that. That's the only thing I see, but.
Right, his house.
Right.
Wall, yeah.
The reason this came up is because the practicality of a 3-foot fence, I don't know how big your dogs are. Could they get over a 3-foot fence?
I mean, I was small, they're probably about 10 pounders, so.
It's not practical for anybody with a dog that can hop over a 3-foot fence. And so
Well-
we had people ask about, could we boost it higher?
This summer, we had a few folks who got a permit for a 3-foot fence rather, and then they complained that, you know, I wish it was a little taller because, you know, the dogs are bigger, and I just heard it, and, you know, that's where we're at now. Now, someone on the council mentioned that folks could do the electronic fence with a collar, and those are getting better now, and people can make a perimeter around their yard and
Right.
keep dogs in. It's not the same as maybe it was 10 years ago or something like that. I hadn't really thought of it that way.
Well, just the fence keeps things out, you know.
Right.
Trying to keep your dog in, but then keep others from coming.
Other dogs can come in.
Whereas, you know, fence can do that, so.
So that's this one. The next one was related to part of gravel, using gravel in certain situations. And the gravel would not be the primary areas of parking. It wouldn't be the primary staff parking or customer parking. But we reworked this to focus on overflow parking, or areas set aside for outdoor storage, distribution, or other logistics. And for some of the very large manufacturers and other types of properties like that, they do have large areas that they use on an occasional basis. Maybe they don't need paving all the time, right? So we want to have a surface, we don't want it on raw earth, but maybe there's some middle ground to do gravel. And with the rains we've had here and the runoff that we're getting, I think we're going to have to start addressing things in very subtle ways that will make a very small difference, but hopefully each one adds up to do something for the good of the community when we're seeing the kind of flood damage that we're experiencing right now. That's what this one's about. You all didn't really have an issue with that last time, the council did, and so I've kind of been reworking it, try to bring it to you tonight. If there's no questions about that, I'll move on to the buffer. And when it comes to buffer, this is the landscape buffer that is adjacent to residentially zoned neighborhoods. So we heard a lot about that the last meeting, about folks who were concerned about being overwhelmed from a commercial standpoint, and from commercial uses or the manufacturing uses. And so we'd like to beef it up a bit, increase the height of the material, plant material, because sometimes those industrial buildings are 30 feet tall. And so You know, if it's an 8-foot high shrub, let's say, it's just not gonna cover much, right? The other thing is the current buffer standard either relied on a single row of plants planted kind of shoulder tight together. So you made a green wall, essentially. I think that's a little too rigid. It'd probably be nice to have a little more flexibility to space and also beef up provisions to try to keep whatever's growing there already. If it's a native tree or something that could do the job, well, maybe we add to it if we could have gaps, but we don't need to cut down trees that are there. We need to encourage keeping all that material that might be existing on the site. So with Mr. Wells, I went out to the site for the Fox track last week. And he's provided a ditch, by the way, to try to take that drainage that was running across the backyards of those folks. He's made a ditch to intercept that water, but he left a really good sized buffer. Now there's not some areas there's not great trees, but some areas there are. There's some really good trees. So we should be able to utilize those existing plant material and fill in where we need to try to, effectuate a really good buffer. What I've done here is rework the types of plants we're encouraged to use. And these are really going to be a little bit larger trees or larger shrubs. They're meant to get tall enough to actually be effective buffer. So the spacing is relative to each plant. And these are not plants that are all native. Some of them are native plants, but some of them are not. But they're not what we call exotic invasives. So like the Bradford pear tree, they're a really bad tree for our area because they get loose. They make fruit. The birds spread them through every farm field all over eastern and central North Carolina. They're covered in Bradford pear trees because they've gotten out of the landscape arena and they've gone wild. so they're forbidden. Some other trees that no one would plant, but they might be existing. I don't want to count them. I'd like them removed if they're buffered trees. I want them out. That would be like tree of heaven or princess tree. They're very noxious trees. And then privet. You can't go on a hike in the mountains anywhere or in the wooded areas and not have privet just all over the place wild. And it's a non-native exotic species. It's carried by little berries. Birds take it and drop it. So don't use privet hedge. But hollies and other things, there's plenty of things to use and also to encourage other natives and other trees. So that's what that ordinance is all about. I can answer any questions for you. We would go from for a manufacturing or M1 or EM1 kind of district, we would be 30 feet wide. That's what we try to do with that bed. When it's adjacent, industrial use is adjacent to a residential zone. If it's commercial, we're going to be a little bit less. It won't be quite as wide. The impacts probably aren't quite as great, but we still need a little bit of something there. So I'd like to have that width be a width of 15 feet around the edge. So that's what we try to do. And I feel like with the growth in Conover, especially the growth of manufacturing, we need to do something. We're going to be expanding into areas that haven't had a manufacturing use before. We're spreading out, if you will, and it's probably time to do a little bit more with this kind of thing. So with that, I can answer any questions, and we would have a public hearing on this. I know there's really no one to attend to, but to open and close it,
Okay.
that kind of thing.
We'll open the public hearing. Okay. Nobody here, we'll close the public hearing. Any comments or suggestions by the board?
Hey, Alan,
Yes.
on the part about the buffers, is there anything that you can do to say that they need to be maintained? Like say I'm thinking, what if 5 years down the road, a hedge starts getting, worms in it or something and it dies off? Who's responsible for replacing it? Is there anything that holds us to where we could actually say, hey, you need to replace this?
Yes, we could require, we have to be brought to our attention probably because we're not back there. But if the neighbor or somebody noticed that the hedge is gone or the buffer's gone, they could replant it, they could require that.
Is that
Okay.
actually written into the?
Yeah, that's in our landscape ordinance already.
Okay, all right, thanks.
We would use code enforcement.
Yeah, we have code enforcement for that. It's typically gonna be a complaint basis. We're not always gonna see them unless they're out on the street side probably. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have a question, just a comment. Thinking on the commercial side of things, I think it would be interesting to know certain species, more capable of sound absorption and things like that when it's, commercial lots going to be budding next to residential neighborhood. I know the folks over here last meeting were concerned about the noise overflow that is going to be generated. And I just thought, if it has some sort of suggestion as to what species work better for absorbing some of the sound. And I guess in addition to that, some of the, visual part of it too. Just a comment.
Thank you.
Just think if some have more branches, more trees,
Yeah,
more leaves, things like that, that would absorb the sound and light also.
I'll say this, no more than 50% of the total plantings can be deciduous. So no more than 50% can be deciduous. That means that there's gonna be at least a mix of evergreen, okay? But there's nothing to say that you couldn't have us all evergreen, in this buffer for that purpose. And the evergreens are probably gonna be your best, they're gonna be the things that denser and all that sort of stuff. Nellie Stevens Hollow, we have some around the back here. We have that buffer with the neighborhood couple houses right there. It's impenetrable. I mean, it's just, those things are, I don't know how long they're gonna quit, but they grow there. Yeah, they're fast. They're a tree. So that's a really good example of something, we're a busy office here, there's a lot going on, and those folks are sitting on this.
Okay.
The big holly trees.
Yeah.
See, there's a lot at,
Maybe we got some-
Cambridge Place between there and Brandywine, and work really well.
They work really well.
Yeah, we got like staggered, like, in a row.
Yeah.
So those changes we need to approve here?
Yeah, you would, I really should have provided some sort of a motion, but I have a council, the consistency statement, someone could, if they felt they wanted to support this, they could kind of read that in the form of a move to approve,
Okay.
the appendix A zoning.
We have a motion to approve?
Hey, Alan, can you clarify one thing for me real quick?
Yeah.
What was the change that you were making for the paved versus rock? Real quick, one more time. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, no problem. There are secondary areas on a site that are often not the primary, it's not where your staff parks, it's not where the customers go. And
Right.
we're trying to find a little more flexibility on those kind of locations where we can use gravel. The point of the gravel would be to have less pavement and less, better impermeability. So there's more imperviousness. Maybe it helps with that water infiltration before it runs off into those creeks that we're seeing such, all this damage from. And so, figuring that it was easier to describe if it's a larger site in these specific districts, the B4, CC, M1, those are our big commercial zones, and they're like, on your maps, they're gonna be, like the gray manufacturing or some of those commercial business ones, things out there on 4th Street, you're heading west over to, Fairgrove Church. Those are bigger tracts of land, and we could probably, make more of an effect in those kind of areas instead of those really small, mixed-use commercial sites. So we adjusted from the description we had last time, Corey, just to try to make it more effective. And so
Okay.
overflow parking or storage, outdoor storage where that's permitted, or distribution and logistics, both of which are really big in this community.
Okay, thanks.
We have a motion?
Move to approve the changes to appendix A.
You said we, the consistency statement. Just want to read that.
Okay, so I move to approve the changes to appendix A with new option for secondary parking areas, changes to fence standards, and the update to the standards for landscape buffers required adjacently residentially zoned areas are consistent with the 2003 land development plan. And the amendments will help to ensure the zoning ordinance is kept current for the growth and development of the city.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Like sign? Okay, changes are approved.
Aye.
All right, next item, Introduction of 160D changes to respond to change in state legislature.
Okay, 160D, in addition to the land development plan, Eric and I have been working heavy duty on 160D. What it's about is it's new zoning rules to consolidate city and county rules in North Carolina. The legislature was working on 160, a big amendment to zoning in subdivision for about 5 years. So it's a big job. You had cities use 160A, counties use 153A, separate sections of statute. And over the years, they were kind of meant to track together, and they kind of did their own thing. So sometimes in the county, you had to do certain things a certain way, and if you were in a city, you had to do things a certain way. So we're trying to, what 160D became the code for cities and counties covering zoning and subdivision and a few other things in North Carolina. So we're trying to get our code linked up to the new standards for the sort of the requirements for 160D. So that's what we're talking about here. Let's see, we have until June 30th to finish up. Appendix A is our zoning regulations. Most of the things will be coming to you. We'll try to start next month and have the zoning part in front of you. It'll be a little bit to come up with. Hopefully we won't have any other, might have one other zoning or rezoning request, but Appendix A is going to be something on our agenda next month. Appendix B is also going to be on our agenda, and that's for subdivision. And there's not really that many changes to that, but it's given us a chance to kind of consolidate our code and make it a little more streamlined for that. And then number 3 is minimum housing standards. Actually, Mr. Pannell, our city attorney, is going to help with that one. It's not my area so I don't know much about it. And I just learned in the last month that we have to update the floodplain regulations. They kind of threw that in with 160D to be upgraded, and so we'll have some amendments. It's not it's a model ordinance, so you kind of insert your community's name and make a few decisions, and basically just adopt the whole thing. And then finally, I'll bring back later a section on telecommunication towers. So every city in North Carolina has a whole separate set of rules about how to approve cell towers. And so the legislature got involved in that, and they're sort of like, well, we're going to need to bring this in because some cities are going way out over here and some are going way out over here. And now they're kind of like putting everybody in the same lane, so to speak, when reviewing cell towers and things like that. So I'll bring that in later. We don't have a lot of that, but we've got to fix our code. I wanted to point out one thing to you though before, and it's related to how we review projects. So the North Carolina statute, this is related to planning board and council. The checkbox is sort of explaining what the state requires. The state ordinance always requires that every map, which is a rezoning, and every code text, which is what we just reviewed, that kind of thing, planning board has to see it every time. You have to weigh in on it. You have to give your recommendation. You can make changes. You could suggest changes. They all go forward. And so council is unable to take action until the planning board sees it, right? And that's how the state says it has to be done. City council has to review the map at a meeting, okay? They have to call a public hearing. In preparation for that meeting, for that hearing, staff has to send out letters for map changes. So even the one that you all just reviewed, we send out letters to neighbors to a certain prescribed distance. We have to do that for city council. We also have to publish legal notice in the paper for text amendments and map amendments for city council hearing. We have to do that every time. We also have to post the site when there's a rezoning. We put you might notice it's a Z sign, it's yellow, and we put it out there at a prescribed period of time. Too early is too early and too late is too late. So you got to do it just at the right time. And that's for the council hearing, okay? But what we do, in fact, here is we match them up. So we treat the planning board as a process that has to completely track the same to city council. And so we have a hearing here for things that we really don't have to have a hearing here for. You know, council has to have that hearing, you don't. We send out the letters, we publish legal notice, we post the site, and all this is kind of an extra, okay? Now, there's some benefits to having this extra. In a way, we're giving the community two options to come and hear about a proposal, learn more about it, and maybe become more informed. And if they care about it, they can, when they show up at council, they're kind of heard about it, it's not a surprise, and council gets a little less static or communication or confusion or support sometimes. You know, people may not care, don't show up because they've learned about it here. So the thing I'm wondering about is our ordinance. This has been our practice default to track those evenly and keep them the same way, but what our ordinance says here for the planning board, it says when you have a map or a text amendment, at the discretion of the planning board, a public hearing may be conducted to consider the proposed amendment. This is the amendment to maps or text. And even though you only have 30 days from the time, according to the ordinance here, when it comes in, you have 30 days to schedule that meeting and make a recommendation and review it. And that's sort of, that language really hasn't changed. I just don't know when we were gonna have time to make a decision at the discretion of the planning board to have this hearing part, right? So our practice has been, well, we're just de facto, we're gonna have a hearing every single time. And I'm not sure else how we would effectuate that. The state law doesn't say you have to have one at all. And your meeting in some towns it's the planning board sits around a table and we have a discussion about proposals. And you weigh in and they send their recommendation, they sign a form, send a recommendation to the city council. And that's all you have to do. Now, I'm just really bringing it to your attention because if you think it adds value to the community, then we'll keep it more or less as proposed. I think what I would do is if we keep the hearing here, we maintain the hearing back, the sort of way we do things, we may just send letters to the neighbors. We may not spend money on an ordinance, on a notice in the paper. It's several $100s each time. We don't really need to do that. And maybe we don't post the site for the planning board. We just do it for council. So we'll always do this for council, and maybe we'll pick and choose a thing or two to do for the planning board. I don't know if you have any feedback on that or any thoughts.
Sounds reasonable, because not everything is gonna be an issue. You know,
Yeah.
some of these things are so small that, like you said, people just aren't going to need to have the public
Yeah.
hearing.
No, but I like what you're recommending. I think, Alan, I mean, I like having the public give their input as much as possible.
Okay.
I mean, to me, it doesn't surprise me that an NC statute would try to be a little shady with not including the public. I mean, for me, sorry. I was gonna say, for me, a planning board is here to do what's right for the community and what's right for the city. And I think it's beneficial to have input when we can get it. I mean, they don't necessarily come out all the time, but I think the input is valuable.
This is Mary chiming in on that. I agree with what Corey is saying. The more opportunity that we can give the residents to play a part and know that we're willing and eager to hear their input, the better for the governance.
Okay. Is there consensus with the group for that? We'll keep the hearing part. What about reducing, we don't do the newspaper notice. I don't think that's necessary because I don't think that's as effective as it once was. But we'll do letters to neighbors when there's a map amendment so people know there's a rezoning application has been received by staff. So that's, what we've done through this whole process with all that activity up on 16.
Agreed, and I think it would be beneficial. I think we do it now, but even to put something on the Conover Facebook page, or something like a little blurb for that kind of announcement. I mean, I think things are going more social media now anyway, right?
Yeah.
I think we spend the money where it's valuable to the city, and I agree with you on that.
I agree. This is Mary. I agree with that. Also, I'm pretty sure that the city makes a practice of posting those proposed changes on its website. Is that correct?
Well, we intend every time to post our agenda on the website and keep that up to date. I don't know, it's, sometimes we don't always remember, so you might need to.
It would behoove us to be as transparent as possible and post those as a practice.
Okay. Okay, so we're gonna bring this amendment in front of you for next, at least for this Appendix A, Appendix B. It's the zoning stuff and it's the subdivision stuff. And if it's too much at one time, you just want to work on one, and we have time. We have till June. I've got to get something to council by June, but we've got a little bit of time to work with if y'all need a little more, you have more questions or it's not clear. But we might send this out early to you all, so you have a little more time to look at it. And hopefully we're ready to do that early. We usually do a week out, but we might be a little bit earlier just to give you more time. So.
I've got a question. Have we just agreed that for us mirroring the city council on its requirements for city, we will do that on a per item basis based on what we discuss here? As to whether we'll hold a public hearing or whether we'll send the letters or we agree now that we'll do everyone, we'll mirror the city council on all those requirements.
I think we're saying we would hold a public hearing each time.
Okay.
We're trying to, see, the way it's been explained to me by our city attorney is when you get in trouble, when you get sued, is when you go away from your procedures. So we haven't followed our procedures that are written exactly. We have a policy of always doing a notification. So if you go away from that for part of the time, and somebody comes back and they take you to court, and the judge says, well, why didn't you follow your procedures for this case? So what Alan is saying is, what we need to do is we need to formalize this in this adoption of this new 160D.
To mirror city council on all.
Right.
Maybe not on these two. I'm thinking, I don't know the effectiveness of this legal notice. This goes in the ONE, and, I don't know. Who really reads legal ads? Nobody. And then maybe to post on the site, I just don't know if that's effective or not. It's not a big deal to post the site, but.
Well, it's helpful if you post the site, and then if you're using social media, then you'll have a link on the social media, because you can't load it all in there, and it will go back to the site link. That's the way we typically do our documents. So you're really posting it in one place and then creating links in your social media account. So just as a practical matter.
Well, this posting, Donald, is actually the Z sign on the site.
Correct, yeah.
For mapping. But yeah, we certainly
Oh,
could.
I'm sorry, I thought you meant website. My apologies.
No, we need to work on that. I wouldn't put it in the code, because this code could be for 20 years and Facebook might be gone in 5. I mean, things come and go. We need to, maybe you could encourage other posting in social media, that the city's using, right? We do actually do Twitter, and we do Facebook. So, but actually, before you know it, it's gonna be another thing, and we're not gonna need to reference that. So we could.
No. I'm with you on that.
Okay.
Yes, I agree too.
Well, thank you. This is helpful.
I like the zoning sign going up earlier.
Yeah.
I think that's really good for the public. That's what the people here, they saw that sign.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what, a zone and sign, they're all the same, right? So I'm not really sure what added expense that's causing, except for having a city person have to go out there and put it in, right?
Yeah, we just need to try to be judicious about our time. We don't have a big office, and we're juggling a lot of different things at one time, so we're always trying to do the best we can. But yeah, that shouldn't be too bad.
Well, Eric mentioned about, when you deviate from your stated procedures when you get in trouble, because we sometimes get to this, we write policies, wow. And so we try to deal with, basically, write a minimum standard.
Right.
If you want to go above and beyond on occasion, that's okay, at least in, my practice. But you always have to do the minimum.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying there is, if we're saying, okay, the planning board, we, give them that ordinance, hold public hearing and send letters. And that's what's stated as, our procedure.
Yeah.
If a situation arises where we need to put out a sign, but that's over and above, is that really considered deviating from your,
Yeah.
standard?
I'm okay with that. I just don't want to so for public involvement, I would like to keep that as standard as we could
Oh, yeah, I
because,
agree with that. I'm not saying that. I said something that Alan's mentioning where, you've got staff limitations and time limitations. Those
Sure.
might be able to be, omitted, but, there might be periodic circumstances where you still do them.
yeah.
But it's over
I just
above
don't
your standard, not below it.
Yeah, I'm fine. I just don't want a future planning board when we're gone and retired to say, oh, well, we don't really have to do this. So then they start sneaking around the system, right?
I
So,
don't know, there's times like that, I did my sitting at the table, slapping the papers.
Listen, some cities do that. That's how they have their planning board. It's like, we sit around the table, we talk about it, and then they're on. And that's, because they feel like the hearing really is council. So, but we're good, we're good. Where I came from in Asheville, we did a very similar process to here. And we had a kind of a mirror image kind of process for what council would do. We would do it at our planning board. So kind of how we've done it here. I think that's, we have a permit report.
Yep.
December. Any highlights on that, Eric, you can think of?
Oh, that was more than a month ago. I can't remember. We had a house in Rock Barn. We had a public building put up at Public Works. That's most of that. Right there.
The Lael Builders. Okay. Right, and then we have a January, a little bit less. Couple of occupancies. The vet up on First Avenue, First Street West. Changed names, it's VetCor now, but they're having maybe another name, but it was Dr. Austin. So that was interesting, and all right, and then I guess we could adjourn this meeting and convene the next.
What are the sign? Are they putting a common sign up for Wendy's and Walmart? Is that what that is?
No. Wendy's is getting their own sign. Walmart is replacing the sign that was hit by a pickup truck.
Oh, okay. The one there beside the gas station.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It was busted through.
All right.
Okay.
We'll adjourn the meeting of the county planning board, and, next we need to pick up open the meeting for the Conover Parks and Recreation Advisory Board.
So, and we thank you for dual service with the planning board members, also serve as the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. And so on occasion, when we have a park expansion or a master plan change, we bring an item to you all. And I noticed that we did have minutes from a meeting we had earlier this year, and it was expanding park area around Conover Station, adding some land in that came off of a purchase of the Alberto site, if you will, and some master planning for trails around there. And so that was minutes that we're actually asking to go to adopt. Did anyone have a chance to review those minutes, July 7th?
Yep. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Have a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
Aye.
Minutes approved.
Okay.
No old business, new business, proposed to purchase a parcel for the Carolina Thread Trail rehabilitation extension and repair.
So this is a site off of County Home Road, you see, in the good days, we had our trail right along the creek side here. And, it's been battered this past year. We had so much rain. And then, the coup de grace was the rainstorm, the 7-inch rainstorm about a month and a half ago, where everything kind of right in here disappeared into the creek. Trees were thrown on their side, the roots are gone, I mean, the soil is gone. And so we've lost our trail through here. We've had to close this whole section because it's been damaged kind of significantly in this area here. Big piles of sand are existing on the site today, and new kind of channels of water were kind of dug out and filled in. So we don't want to lose that trail. It's important linkage, because actually we have some trail system coming down County Home Road over here town, and then this goes really over to behind the Walmart at the, kind of the site where the MJP park is, kind of in that area. So we'd like to purchase that land, and I did have a plan in front of everybody. It's a little hard to see on that. No, I'm good, but actually, maybe and Eric's got it up, I think, here. The site is gonna be almost about 16 acres of land. We buy the whole thing, and we relocate the trail way to the back, get it off the creek front. What we were operating with at the time was what we were operating with was like a 15-foot easement that was tied to the stream bank, okay? So when that stream bank disappeared and is gone, we're kind of out. So the Carolina Tread Trail has been generous to Conover, and areas just a little further south and west. They'd given us a grant to try to purchase a piece of land, but we had trouble kind of finishing that transaction. And we're asking them to kind of redirect the funds that they had held aside for us to purchase this property and try to rework it as a new park. And that is what we have in front of you today. The trail would kind of start back here at County Home and move to the back. We've developed a parking area using crushed concrete, kind of sets up, but it's semi-pervious. And then there's just so much sand in here, we thought, well, we could establish a few sand volleyball courts down there, maybe 2, and use that sand. We don't have to do anything about bringing material in. And then the other idea was a low impact, but maybe popular use could be disc golf. And it would be a 9-hole disc golf course. The costs on these things are not real high. You buy the goals and you make your course, and it could be a really neat thing. We don't have one in Conover, but people really enjoy that. So, yeah. So we're, we haven't taken this to council yet. I thought we'd start here, and we would try to get a contract to purchase that property, and if use that trail money that was set aside for a purchase, redirect it here, and then try to fill it. If there's any gap in the funding, we might need a little more money from the general fund and just finish up the purchase. Now this work may take 1 or 2 budget cycles to get funds set aside for paving first and reestablishing the trail. That would be the first job we do, is get that trail back in business, and then this other stuff could be added at a future date.
Any idea what the cost we're looking at there?
I think the improvements for the things we saw would be less than 20,000. Might be about 15.
In terms of the property itself.
The property itself, it's likely going to be about 26, 27 for about 16 acres. And we have about 18 sitting aside from that, the Carolina Tread Trail. So we've got to augment that, and finish it up. So we've got a little bit of money to spend on a couple different budget years probably to get it started and stuff. But I don't know if you have any thoughts or feedback. It'd be a really important park, I think, once it's.
I think it's great, yeah, and all of it. So we get it all.
Will it be accessible from back Walmart and stuff, the trail knows?
If you go down Northern Drive, you go to the bottom, there's parking there before the bridge, and that's the other end of this thing, on the east side.
Okay.
So you're kind of there, and it's real popular. People are down there all the time.
And it goes all the way down to the light at County Home and 10th Street.
Along that trail, there's a fabulous view of the other side of the boat with mannequins in it. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
It's still gonna be,
It's like, and here's.
Actually,
Oh, it's
this
so
was move that up.
yeah. I mean, it's, I say fabulous and very scary kind of. Like,
It's like-
yeah, you like.
You like size of land?
Yeah.
Now, is it here?
No,
I
look
think so.
further
Down a
down,
little
yeah,
bit.
right there.
Just be out of the
Yeah. After the
picture. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's far down the stream, it's not on the map.
yeah. You can see kind of the beginnings of it right there.
Yeah, right at the top one.
Netting always reminds me of the Silence of the Lambs movie for some reason.
Yeah, it's very like,
I think it's yellow.
what's running through here?
Yeah, that's right. Keep moving. So anyway, we're glad to bring this to you. I don't know if you have any other thoughts. So, someday we'd like to have other park facilities elsewhere. This won't cover it all, right? This isn't that big, but, we're always thinking about, options and use of property. So we're always trying to bring more kind of facilities to, Conover residents and things we don't have yet, so.
This entire area does flood quite often. It's
Yes.
entire floodplain. I mean, everything you see all the way to the proposed Greenway Trail.
Yeah.
But I think that, the Frisbee golf would be so low impact, you're not really doing anything, altering the floodplain itself.
Right.
Concrete park or crushed parking lot, everything needs to be pervious.
Yeah.
Anything impervious would be a disaster there.
Right.
I hope that rerouting the trail this way does help, because we do need that. It's nice there
Yeah.
to have.
The nice part, one of the nice parts is at the very back, where you start off from the parking, you actually climb. There's like a little rise right through here, a little, so it's slope, kind of a little road, and then we'll go back down, into the site. So there's parts of it that will always stay dry, which is good. And we'll just try to do the best we can. Like you're saying, not affecting the floodplain and have the waters come up, the waters can leave and they don't destroy,
Right.
the elements we have there.
Yeah. I'd like to see us tackle the Greenway first, and then maybe think about the Frisbee golf, because these woods right here are really thick.
Yeah.
But great idea.
But what if we did the disc golf stuff, we would kind of field place that. It wouldn't, we're not gonna, we don't want to lose trees, so.
Yeah.
We can really adjust.
Because these woods,
I could really
do it.
Down this
7 or 8 hole golf club.
Yeah.
You go down behind Walmart.
So we would be real careful in there. We just needed to display something, but we don't intend to.
You
through
know,
there.
you can see an entrance to this trail here. And it comes just all, those these long water all over here.
Any other comments about this project right now?
Except for right here.
I think Alan too, as far as recreational amenities, this is really the only thing in this quadrant of town. Across in the north, the down quadrant, we really don't have anything else to support recreation. So I think it's supposed to council as far as having equitable resources would be for every quadrant.
Yeah.
Is this an informational item or is this something we need to?
Well, you would, because you're the advisory board, we appreciate just a simple, if you support, whatever, a motion to support and vote on that. We would note this for any kind of fundraising we do in the future. Oftentimes, we have to have it reviewed and approved by our advisory board.
So we should make a motion to go into it and move forward with the project is set for here.
Thank you, yes.
Do we have a motion to approve? Second? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, like sign.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right.
And then business will do the order there.
I think that's got it.
During the meeting.
Thank you. See you next month.
Sorry for coming a few minutes late. The meeting after the meeting.
Thanks, Mary.
Very good.
6:30 this morning.
Long day.
Yeah, good enough, Sam. Yes, we make the, they just have one over.
Basically, cable industry.
We know when they say.
We also have a medical.
House.